Hey everybody, I'm here with my new guest in the studio, Dave Tomlinson, and he's here because of his newest book, Man with the Plan. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Hi. Yes,
Well,
that's
Dave,
right. Howard Wilkinson.
About Howard Wilkinson, and notably on the period where he guided Leeds to the
That's right.
Premier League. To the title.
Yeah, where's real football, you see?
Exactly. And just to start off somewhere, wasn't he voted manager of the season in that season?
Probably. I'd have to cast my mind back. I'm getting to that age when I can't remember these
Because
things. I believe so. I believe so.
it doesn't say so on his Wikipedia site. And I was like, he must have
Yeah,
been.
well, it depends if you believe what's on Wikipedia, don't you? You
Yeah.
get this when Leeds are rumoured to be having a new player. Suddenly there's a Wikipedia page.
Anyway, congratulations on the book. How many is that now?
I think it's 10. I sometimes lose count because I had a few on Amazon did self-publishing, and they pulled them for a variety of reasons. So I think I've written 10. There's about 7 out. I think there's another couple in the next year as well. So I'm actually quite prolific. Unfortunately, I'm a bit obsessed, but it's about 10. But I suppose this is the one I'm most proud of.
Yeah. Why so?
Well, I think it's really around. I managed to get Howard to talk to me. He spent a couple of hours with me going through a lot of details and stuff. I got a lot of the players to also share things, and it was just being able to go into that. And it was also really, I suppose, trying to capture what it was like at that time. Really, because it was incredible. It's one of those things, and Leeds do this quite a bit. They go through this period where it's just, mythical. Just, it was fantastic. Where you got there weren't that many great players. There was a few really, really good players, but there weren't that many great players. But it was just the team spirit, and that's what Wilkinson always stressed. It was all about the team, all about the team, and it's just saying some of that in there. And it's also, I remember at the time, everyone was predicting, absolutely certain Man United were going to win it.
Yeah.
And it was just that when you had to point out, look, it's 25 years since you've won the title, actually. Just remember, we've won it twice before you.
Yeah.
3 times now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna start a bit backwards here, and I'm gonna come out with a few guns blazing.
Oh yeah.
He obviously took Leeds to the title in '92.
Yeah.
Massive achievement. But was he a good enough manager to keep Leeds at the top?
I believe so. I think if you, because I asked him the same question about what happened following on from that, and there's a whole series of things. I think people would say Leeds probably peaked too soon, and he was banking on this long-term plan in terms of, and it's still flourishing now, the youth development scheme. And he talks about himself, what happened with Champions League 2001. That was a lot of players that came through that route. Now, I also asked him, would you have traded that? Yeah, if you could guarantee, something.
Of course.
I would have traded for it. But you strike while the iron's hot. I mean, it was a number of things, wasn't it? It was about Cantona going and the falling out. It was about the back pass rule changing. It was about money with the Premier League. And it's if you look at it, it was around, I suppose, were Leeds really big enough to capitalise? Because, they did spend quite big just after they won the title, but they didn't really push on. And there were a few things. I think he was, but it was almost like it coincided. And it was just I believe they started believing in themselves a bit too much, the players. He says that himself, and some of the players say exactly the same. So I think it was just many things, but you wouldn't trade it, would you?
No, of course not. Of course not. It's still a bit massive achievement. But I just sort of got a small impression reading your book that he got a bit lost in that time.
It depends who you talk to. It depends who you talk to. I think he would recognise himself a few poor buys. I think as much as anything, and he admits this himself, he was trying to mark time waiting for people to come through. So he tended to go with these typical Wilkinson signings. A lot of players from Sheffield, both United and Wednesday. And the fans didn't like that. They like things like Cantona. They like Brolin, at least to start with. And there was a few things went bad. There was also that season, really screwed them up badly, 92, 93. Now, he says himself, if they'd have got through against Rangers in the European Cup, it might have all been different. So a lot of this is always about what's in players' heads and confidence. And they just couldn't win away from home. They played some good. They didn't have that bad a start, but they just lost the way. And then it seemed to be, after that, came back the following couple of years, they did really well. So the football wasn't always to everyone's taste, and they did replace and downgrade a number of players. But until probably the last 8 months or so, it was still going fairly well. People tend to forget they were still a top 5 side, still in the top 5 all the way through that. At a time when there were a lot of clubs coming through in the early days of the Premier League, they were still a really big club. But, you know, the wheels came off in 96. And a lot of that was just, African Cup of Nations and stuff like that. But I believe so. I believe he's a great manager. I'm not sure whether he translates to other clubs. I'm not sure he translates to these times, and certainly didn't translate to England.
No, it didn't. But you mentioned the football, so that's one of the reasons I'm picking up on this, because he's not too fond of hearing that he's one-dimensional, long balls and whatnot, old-style football, a kick and rush and whatever. But he stuck to those players.
Well, he
playing
did.
That style, if you do go back prior to him coming to Leeds, he became known for long ball at Sheffield Wednesday because he was playing to the players he'd got there. But prior to that, when he really came into the fore at Notts County, that was a real passing side, and he valued that. So, and you go back in history where he first started from, the guy that almost he was listening to, Alan Wade, who was at the FA, was all about that Barcelona type. So I think he really valued that, but he recognised he had to play to what he had. And I think certainly in the second division as it was then, it's difficult to play pretty football. You could play good football, and certainly Strachan was excellent. There was a number of other excellent players in there. Oh, absolutely,
you have to a certain extent, play to the surroundings and play to the players you've got. And he's also, remember, when he first started there, they were playing on a pitch that they were sharing with a rugby league team. So the pitch wasn't great. They had Sheridan. He rapidly got rid of John Sheridan because it didn't suit the pitch. But, it's about, I suppose with Leeds, and it was the same as yesterday in the playoffs, what they love, the fans, the spirit, and really they don't want other people to like Leeds. So it's almost the fact that other people don't rate Wilkinson as a manager, the fact that they deride him and talking about a long ball merchant, they don't care. And to be honest, it's about the team, the club, and the fans of that club, not others. So I'd sooner he wasn't rated, but he could have gone to Arsenal at one stage. He was offered the job at Arsenal, but either he turned it down or wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
So he was rated by different people. It's like, it's all about style in football, isn't it? People have a different view about it. I mean, people didn't like George Graham, but he was a great manager, won trophies. It depends how you judge it.
Yeah. You rate him as one of the greatest English managers of all time.
I think he is. Based on getting the best out of what he had at his disposal, turning the club around that was really in the doldrums, making them believe, the same as Bielsa really, making them believe and making the city believe in themselves again, restoring that, I suppose, self-confidence, the confidence that they could do something, confidence that they were a really great side. Because, some of those were quite average players. They were decent players, solid players. But he bought some real duds even in those years. There was 3 or 4 of the ones he bought when he was in the second division that never paid off. But the spirit was fantastic, absolutely wonderful. And the crowd player bonding, wonderful. But, it went sour, as it always does. You've only got so long in there. But certainly, he was absolutely right for the time, for that team, for the club, and I suppose for what was required to turn it round.
While you're right about this, that while at Sheffield Wednesday, he had a reputation as a tyrant in preseason, but he dismisses that himself. But there's the same rumblings around at Leeds. What's your impression?
So, as I understand it, what he said himself is actually a lot of it was down to what he inherited there, and a lot of it was brought on by a former manager at Sheffield Wednesday, a guy called Alan Brown, and he recounts the story, which is included in the book, about actually he just inherited that. But sometimes you're not really sure whether to believe him or not, because he's got a real dry wit. And there was the thing about, I think it was when he went to Sunderland or another club, they talked about, someone said to him, oh, you had him in for 4 hours and then they come out, limping or whatever. He goes, yeah, no, absolutely wrong. It was 2 days. But you don't know whether to believe him. He was just this real dry wit. And the players that played for him, the better players, the ones that really Leeds are all about, loved him. They would run through brick walls for him. Absolutely. Still. And you go, I start the book with, I went to one of these real class of 92 things and how we was there. And, it was just the respect in the room from the players, the fans, etc. It's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
And McAllister also credits him, Howard, with actually lasting so long.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He had quite the temperament on him. You write about an incident where he smacked John Pearson around the face.
Yeah. Well, again, you believe what you choose to, but there was a bit where he did smack John Pearson around the face, trying to get a reaction out of him, trying to get him to wake up, and he just laughed at him, chuckled to him, took his ways away. But he did like that type of competitiveness, fight, the team spirit amongst players. He felt it was really good. There's also a well-known story about when Vinnie Jones went there, about him giving someone a bloody nose, and he said, no, that's not so good, Vinnie. I didn't see one speck of blood down there. That's not what I brought you for, because it was about building the team spirit, getting the bonding in there, getting people to really be competitive. So it is. I mean, you couldn't do that today, for instance, but it was a different world. It was a very different world, different sport. And it was about, same as Ferguson, all these things you hear about them. Some of those managers couldn't exist today. Whether they succeed or not is debatable, but certainly he was no holds barred with it, and he wanted players to stand up to him. He was trying to get a reaction, and he would do anything. So Mel Sterling tells the stories of, he used to have players both at Sheffield Wednesday and Leeds. He didn't mind them having set twos because it showed it cared. There's another story once where he kicked a table in the training room. I think he broke his foot or something like that, or he wasn't showing the pain. But that's also why he had Mick Hennigan as assistant manager. It's almost like they do talk about good cop, bad cop, but I think it was bad cop, bastard cop is how it's described in there. And you choose which of those two is the is the bad and which is the worse.
But just a question on Leeds. It's such a massive club. They are. You always hear that with such a big following. It's a big town, city with only one big club in it. Why is it so hard for Leeds to stay at the top level? You write about it in your book where they once they sold Ellen Road, I believe.
Yeah,
and
several times.
To balance the book a bit, books a bit. Yeah. And one season later, they were once again in minus. What is going on? Why is it always so difficult?
I think there's a number. There is a number of things in there. So if I try and package this through, there's things like, for instance, when players start believing their own publicity, they go off. When Leeds are into this situation, they start thinking they're there, or this season that we're just coming to the end of. They were right on the toes. They'd pulled it all the way back. They should have been able to walk it. Heads went. It was just confidence thing. So you get that. You also get, and going way back when, they've always been in debt. Even in Don Revie's time, they overextended themselves around it. They got in a really strong financial position by the time he left to go to England. But it went rapidly downhill because the directors believed in themselves rather than in Revie. They thought they could bring someone in. They didn't manage it well. And there's well-publicised things, the Ridsdale years. It's all these things about, in a world where it's all driven by money, money is a real driver. then you're going to start paying over the odds for players. You start bringing in mercenaries who don't really value the club. But it's equally when it's when you go up from the Championship to Premier League, you ditch what's got you there because you have to compete at the top. And there's very, very few clubs now. There used to be, but there's very, very few clubs now remain true to what they were when they came up. So it used to be before Leeds made it big. Both Liverpool and Ipswich had won the title within the 2 years of coming up. Indeed, Ipswich were from third division in a couple of years. And I think it's just really around that combination of things. It's money, it's player confidence, it's continuity. And it's simply now, it's just really difficult to compete. And Wilkinson does talk about the hardest thing isn't winning the title, it's staying there.
Mm.
And you do get, once the team wins the title, they have a dive the following year. Because it's never the same. You get this real strange thing. Something happens over the summer. What it shouldn't do, you finish the season really strongly, and then you can't buy a win the following year. But Leeds really suffers from that. And it seems to me, and there's this thing about Leeds, it's the hope that kills us. Just when you think you're there and it's easy and you're actually there, that's when it gets snatched away. And that was what was so great about last night in terms of the playoffs, and what was so appalling about Derby 5 years ago, because I went to both of those. And I said to someone after the Derby game, best day of my life and worst day of my life, because it was just the crowd that night lifted them and lifted them and lifted them when it went bad. But disastrous, because they're 2-0 up. No team has ever won away and then not gone through in the playoffs. Well, Leeds always do. No team's been top at Christmas and didn't go up. Leeds do. Because, you start to believe it. And I think it is. The really great managers are those that are able to maintain it. So I hate him. But Ferguson, really great manager. Because it was constantly changing and keeping there and the standards and not allowing disruption. But it was strange then, because he had doubts about buying Cantona and taking him in, but it worked out for him. But that was a real gamble, and that was unusual. But it was the making of that team.
Yeah. Well, Wilkinson dropped the league to take over at Leeds. Even for that period, wasn't that incredibly unusual? He wasn't even sacked before taking over.
No, absolutely. I think it was, and he says it himself. Everyone thought he was stupid or crazy. I think he describes his wife certainly thought he was crazy. And a lot of people did, because he was really highly regarded, one of the most up-and-coming coaches or managers in the game at the time, really well regarded. And I think it was about, he just bought into the vision of the guy that was there, the chairman at the time, Leslie Silver. And it was just a meeting of the minds. And he really worked well with Silver. The two really respected each other and stayed apart from it. And it was he just bought into that vision. And it was about, and I think this is the thing about Leeds, they are, as you said, a massive club. If you go in there and turn them round, as Bielsa did, as Wilkinson did, as Revie did, and others have done as well. But if you do that, you're a messiah in that place. They love you. Bielsa, they were almost saying at the time, we'd sooner go down with Bielsa than stay up with somebody else. And they still say now, I wish he'd come back, because it's the identification with them. It's the identification with them. I don't know if I answered the question there. I do ramble a bit, you see, Jacob. You have to keep me on track.
No, it makes sense. But just going back to his football a bit, Brian Clough hated his style.
Yes, he did.
But a magazine like World Soccer called him, what was it? He was a deep thinker. Where do you stand on the football he practiced?
So, controversial, Brian Clough, but he too was a great manager. But you get a lot of things where he was a real taskmaster. He used to, physically assault people. He used to be a real drinker. He was known to take bribes, etc. A lot of things like that. But he was fantastic. I remember in the 70s, real breath of fresh air. I mean, it's like, you talk about arrogance, but it's also about confidence. He was fantastic. The greatest manager never to manage England. And I think that's right, because he was the people's choice. But he wasn't right for Leeds at the time. You wonder, if he'd have stayed or they got through that, would they have done what Forest did afterwards? I think the problem was he he believed he had to do something. He didn't take Peter Taylor with him and suffered from that.
Mm.
So really, he was a bit of a one-trick pony. It depends what you believe. I mean, it's about, he thinks the players would never let him go away with it. They would have done. I mean, players aren't like this. It's really odd. People have an interesting view of players that they believe all this and whatever and all that thing. They would have gone along with it because they were about professionals wanting to succeed. They wanted to win the European Cup. They wanted to win the league again. They didn't want it to go bad. But there was this thing about, he insulted them. He insulted the professionalism, and he insulted the guy that had worked with them because he couldn't do anything else.
Mm.
But you do think about, I don't know what would have happened, and that's the great imponderable. Certainly, he was talking about, in the time he was there, replacing David Harvey with Peter Shilton, Norman Hunter with Colin Todd, and doing those type of things. So you would have had a season of change, but I'm not sure the fans could have accepted after what he'd said previously. The board was split about him. There was a couple of ones that didn't really want him in the first place, and there was some manipulation going on. I mean, they talk about player power, but it was Sam Bolton who was way back as the chair, who, just took the opportunity to get rid of him.
Yeah.
I know there was a lot of excitement about it, and I know the year before he joined, there was a poll about, because Don Revie nearly went to Everton in '73, and there was a poll about who should replace him, and there's a lot of support from fans about Brian Clough. But the reality is never the same, is it? And I think it was just, he tried to do too much. But you go back to Wilkinson, he did much the same. Clough set fire to Revie's desk and a lot of stuff. He really rubbished the past for reasons, because he didn't get on with Revie and a whole series of things. When Wilkinson went in, he demanded that the photos of the old good times went, but he was going on the basis of, look, they can go back up when we're good enough. He took a different approach. It wasn't because I say so. There was a reasoned approach, and he built a new team around it. And it was also at that stage, it was very different from him coming in. Leeds needed something to move him on.
Mm.
At the time when Revie left and Clough came in, they needed someone to keep it going, to transition. Now, Jimmy Armfield was right for that, but again, he's not the greatest manager in the world. They do talk about, he couldn't take a decision to save his life, but he was right for that transition.
Yeah.
And it was about the team building, the working with the players in the pantomime and all stuff like that. The best managers, not just in football, but in all walks of life, the best managers are the ones that are right for the circumstance, the ones that build the right culture, take people with them, and can sustain it. They need to embed, not, I suppose for me, a hero worship type thing, a charisma, and it depends on them. They need to build a legacy, and that, I think, was what Wilkinson was trying to do. He talks about legacies at length, and he's really proud of what followed on from him. He was distraught when they sold Thorpe Arch. He was distraught when Paul Hart got the boot in there because it was rubbish in his legacy. But he doesn't like calling it a legacy. He's an incredibly humble man, I suppose.
Mm.
And, I really value that. Humility is a great thing in great people. You could never call Brian Clough humble, could you?
No. But just going back to the thing you said about most of the players really loved him, but there was also a David Batty who had a few, should we call him nice words on his relationship with Wilkinson. And you mentioned that a few times in your book. He had a really strange relationship with Steve Hodge.
Yeah, okay. So if we talk about Batty first, I think Batty makes no excuse for that, no secret of the fact that he didn't rate his football. He believed what you hear, the popular story about the long ball. He didn't rate that. Despite what people think about David Batty, he always says he loves passing football. He loves that type of stuff going through. He also talks about Wilkinson being really boring, and some others talk about these long rambling team talks where it goes over and over and over. So, he didn't take that. He couldn't do that, and he was quite disruptive in training. And Wilkinson, in the end, just accepted it. So there's this thing where Batty was always disruptive. So what he did was he got a ball, Batty's ball, give it to him, now bugger off and we'll do the training. But then there was also this other thing where Wilkinson was talking to the players about, they were passing around an imaginary ball and they're all going along with it. And then Batty comes along and boots it, this imaginary ball, that's that over. And it was just, he didn't like authority. He had been mentored by Billy Bremner, who was prior to Wilkinson, was the manager there, and he just couldn't take the change. He played really great football for Wilkinson, never mind that. And Wilkinson really rated him, but it was, again, that clash between the two, a real clash between the two. But I remember when Batty, pre-season 92, 93, they had this Makita Cup, and it was in there. He was giving Roberto Mancini a real hard time, and the referee told Wilkinson to take him off before he sent it off. No, he's doing the right job for me. They respected each other, but they didn't like each other.
Okay.
I think Steve Hodge was a different thing. Steve Hodge, he paid nearly £1 million for him. He tried to buy Steve Hodge while he was at Sheffield Wednesday years before. And he does talk in his autobiography or wherever, the book that Wilkinson wrote, complete footballer. He's got everything a midfielder would have. But Steve Hodge had a lot of injuries, and they couldn't work out what was driving that. And that was something that really turned Wilkinson against him, probably unfairly. And he did give him an awful hard time. He was always taking the piss out of him and just really criticising him. And he was the butt of a lot of jokes. And I'm really not sure what happened. I know I spoke to Steve Hodge about whether he'd give me some insight for the book or whatever. And he was saying, look, I wouldn't give you anything decent because they just weren't made for each other. And Hodge, he talks about, and he describes in here, he could have got a move earlier, but Wilkinson, almost out of spite, didn't put him on the market at the time. He couldn't get in the side. He was a really good player. He scored a lot of goals in the championship season. He made a contribution. But you'd got this thing, you'd still got Strachan, McAllister, Speed and Batty. So how you get into that? But he could have used him in a different way. He could have took him to one side, but Wilkinson had some players that he took against her. So Sheridan was one.
Yeah.
Hodge was another. Cantona was certainly another. It was just this thing. Some didn't get it. Now, I don't know. You can't tell because you're not behind the scenes. But that went really bad, really went downhill fast. And it was bad for neither of them. Sorry, it was good for neither of them. It did neither of them any favours. And you think at times, why didn't they just have us sorting it out? What was causing that? Because we should be working for this as opposed to your crap, I'm the boss. And it just needs to be. At times, you need someone outside to just give him a push. But certainly, Steve Hodge got a terrible time. But he was a really, really good player. Great midfielder, as Wilkinson says himself.
But now you brought in, you mentioned Cantona there. Considering how he got rid of Vince Hilaire, got rid of John Sheridan, the way he treated Steve Hodge, how on earth did he ever think it was going to work out with a player like Cantona?
Well, what he said was, before he took him on, he did a lot of talking to people who knew about Cantona in France. Gerard Houllier, Glenn Hoddle and others, people who understood the French system. They all said the same. Great player, real talent, falls foul of authority, etc. And he is that type of stuff. But he's worth the gamble. And at that stage, what drove it was Chapman's injury. So Lee Chapman, I think it was then that he broke his wrist playing against Man United in one of the cups. So they had to do something. But at that time, they actually did two things. He brought in Cantona, who was I suppose he'd got estranged from France. He was on a trial period at Sheffield Wednesday, but they couldn't do a deal there. There was a bit of arrogance from Cantona, depending on what you believe, and he just took a gamble on him. And it was based on a loan initially, and it was just a risk that they thought were worth taking, and they worked through that, agreed to do it. But just after that, he brought in another player on loan, Tony Garner from Sheffield United, or he'd been at Sheffield United previously, completely different. And actually, they were both competing, but it was about that thing. Almost, he was caught between. The fans love Cantona. The fans love the flair. They love players like that. They love a cult hero. They really get that. And you get, again, depending on who you talk to, Was he bigger than Wilkinson, or was it that ego clash? Could they both be in there? I don't know. But certainly when he scored that goal against Chelsea, the fantastic one, a couple of days before they had to work out whether they made that move carried on or not, he couldn't get rid of him at that stage. And you see that the following season, 2 hat-tricks right at the start of the season. Wonderful, wonderful player. But Wilkinson was about the team. To get the best out of Cantona, he'd have had to almost allow him to dictate. He'd have had to build his side around him. And he couldn't do that because it would have meant changing too many other things. And again, that could have worked out very differently. But you could see the writing on the wall. He took the view that this has happened previously. So other clubs in France have ended up, getting nothing for him. He's just walked off, gone his way, and he's going to do that. I'll cut my losses and do this. Now, retrospect, really good decision for Man United, but they still say in Leeds, best decision. It was the right thing to do. At the time, it wasn't.
Yeah.
You could see that, and the fans were all up in arms about it, hated it, and they loved Cantona, really loved him. But now they despise Cantona. You know what I mean? They really despise him, and it's. I don't know. Judgment's a wonderful thing, isn't it? So he often talks about Wilkinson, about bringing in Thomas Brolin, and he probably should. He was a bit equivocal about it, but he should have gone with his gut. But at the time when they brought in Cantona, it was a fair risk at the time because he thought without Chapman he'd have no one to score. Chapman came back really, really quickly off the back of that. And people think about Cantona was a major contributor in the Championship years. He wasn't. He didn't play that many games. Played about 9, many as subs. Scored a few goals, but it was carried largely by the players that he'd already got there. So Cantona was largely used as an impact sub, but he was incredible in that. Really, really good. But the two of them, they just didn't get on. You could see that, and it was just the blatant, flouting the authority. He got no respect for the team. He got no respect for Wilkinson. He got this view about himself, quite rightly, arrogant guy, confident guy, really great player, fantastic player, really great at Manchester United because used in the way that you get the best out of him. But you remember, even when he went to United, kung fu kick into the crowd and whatever, he was one of these mavericks, real mavericks, and Wilkinson doesn't do mavericks. Same with Vince Hilaire. You mentioned him earlier on. Vince Hilaire speaks really badly of him because he didn't like the football. He didn't like what it did to him. He thought there was more to it than hard work, and it is. Football is about different opinions, and they're all valid. What you have to do is build those into something that takes a team, a club forward.
Yeah.
And it's about embracing that. But you had to have one leader, one manager, to have the clarity, but that can be dictatorial. You've got to really get the right balance. But what you want is the players to buy into your vision and to really run through it for you, but also for the manager to listen to. And he talks about Yeboah. So Yeboah, you would say he's not the typical Wilkinson signing,
No.
a real star player, a great goal scorer, world class. And he talked about the players, Gordon Strachan, Gordon Speed, and I think it was Gary McAllister came to see him as a deputation. Look, don't be hard on Tony. We know when he gets the ball, he's going to score. Don't make him run back. Don't do that because you'd spoil him. And he really respected them for saying that. He didn't mind people disagreeing with him if they got a valid reason. He was encouraging people to be adults. So he's got this thing from his education thing. He talks about, rather than apprentices, he talks about, being scholars and stuff like that, because it's about building the individual, building the person, rather than, having mindless slaves. He talks about robots, and I asked him about David Batty in the falling out, and he said he didn't want a team of robots. He wanted people with flair and difference, but they had to fit into the overall style. If they didn't make the collective better, they're not really helping.
Yeah. What did you feel like? What was your opinion when they sold Cantona? Were you also of the opinion that he needs to go now? Or
wasn't close enough to it. You get this thing. I think it was about certainly the internet wasn't as widespread, social media wasn't there, so you only got snippets of this thing going through. I think my main concern was, Christ, what's happened here?
Yeah.
It was just more about, I'd got not a clue at that stage about what had caused it. I just knew it was going badly. My focus was more, I suppose, about how are they going to get back to winning ways? How do they avoid relegation? Why aren't they playing in the same way? It was a shock, massive shock. But I get this thing about my identification is with the club and the fans rather than necessarily the players. When you get the right player, the right manager, and it all fits together, that's wonderful. But it's about the club, and you talk to the fans. They will always identify the club. The fans are there much longer than anybody, managers or whatever. You get the right managers and the right players, they love them, like Revie and others. They really worship some of these guys that have never done the dirty on the club, have always been true, have showed loyalty. They know players going to leave, like Luke Ayling going on. They love him.
Yeah.
They love him because it was right for the two. No selfishness, no, whinging and moaning, and, he's going to move on to but I think he's doing okay, but he wasn't right for Leeds at the time. You get the same thing with Charlie Creswell. Fantastic player, but there are better players in there, and it's what do you do with that? Do you hold on to, how can you persuade Charlie Creswell, who could get a deal somewhere else, to stay? And it's just this thing about how do you get the best for the team? And sometimes you do need to accept it. There is going to be turnover. It's like whether Leeds go up or not, there will be change in the summer. There's bound to be, driven by money now.
Yeah.
But at the start of this season, Ampadu, quite a decent player and well known, etc. But a real risk. Fantastic player. Joe Rodon. No one's really heard of him. Kamara. There's views about Kamara, but you'll always find decent players. It's the coaches that do things with them, get the best out of them, and make them function in a team. But even when you've got those, things can still go bad. But it's always about, it's the team, it's the club. It's not, the individuals. You love an individual because you love to be excited about things. But if you get someone that doesn't work for the team, and this is what Leeds fans love, they love a trier, an honest trier, like Berardi, Cooper. Yesterday, Cooper was getting great support, really great support, but they still call him League One Liam because of all the slips and stuff. But he's a real club man, real loyal. He could have moved in the January window, but he chose not to. He's not going to have a contract with Leeds, but he's still there. And he's still writing the columns. And he's still inspirational. And that's what Leeds fans love. It's just that. Cantona, all this stuff about, I don't know why I love you, but I do. I mean, it's whether you believe it. It's whether you get the kiss in the badge. And it's things like Alan Smith. That went really downhill. But people still love the spirit. You couldn't understand why he went to Manchester United. You believe this thing about, if he hadn't gone, we'd have really struggled financially. He was doing it for the right reasons. He turned down loyalty bonuses. But the fans hated that, particularly as they'd gone 1 week earlier. He was never going to go anywhere. He got Bolton. They were carrying him off the pitch. Week after, they found out what had gone on. They hated him. You just get that change, just that thing. Manchester United, you can't do that. Well, you had Johnny Giles and you had these coming the other way, Yeah. You have to get a bit. You've got this thing about, it's very rare these days you get loyalty for players to clubs. But I think the best players at Leeds, and I think this is, I've said to other people previously, Leeds is a real community club. And the players, I think, largely get that. You get some individuals that don't, and they don't tend to last. But this is a fantastic club, and it's why I support them. My wife said to me yesterday as we were driving up, have you ever thought about changing club? Come on. You can't change your club, can you? And it's an incredible affinity between city, people, and club. Fantastic, like no other one. You do get this thing about prawn, sandwich brigade, Manchester United, and people from London. Who am I? I live in Birmingham, Sport Leeds, but you get this. It's about the identification, the culture, the spirit, affinity with what you believe in, and it's this thing about spirit, commitment, loyalty. And people have asked me about, in the work. I work in the NHS Director of Finance. And people, you ask there, who are your heroes? And I always go, Billy Bremner, because of the spirit, what he did within the team, the leadership around it. People like that are few and far between. And you get this, the really important thing, side before self. And it's that humility, lack of self-centeredness, fight for the team, the spirit, the motivation, and not disappointing the fans. And someone was talking to me yesterday at the playoffs, and this thing about the lost their heads and this stuff. And it was all about, actually, you can say you play for your professional pride, but it's about don't disappoint the fans. A lot of people out there have spent their hard-earned cash to come here. Don't disappoint them. They love you. They'll love you, whatever. Don't disappoint them. Don't disappoint them.
I think that's a perfect place to round this off, Dave.
Oh.
It was brilliant. Just tell us, where can people buy your book? It's out on Pitch Publishing, I believe.
Yeah, so they can go to the Pitch Publishing and get it from there. So there's a Pitch Publishing website. If you do a search, you'll find it on there. It's available on Amazon. I've got a few copies myself. Happy to do ones if people want to contact me, dave.tomlinson@gmail.com. Happy to do signed copies. There's a few of those just on eBay at the minute. I tend to do that, when things first come out. It's through all the normal outlets. They should be able to get this any decent bookstore, but I always go via Amazon, although they screwed me over once. But I'm not going to talk about Amazon.
That's for another podcast.
That is, yes.
Dave, it's been brilliant talking to you. Once again, congratulations on your book. I hope it goes well.
Okay.
And I hope we see Leeds back in the Premier League soon.